things. First of all, we're a bank. So what are we doing within the community relative to loans and areas, and things that make sense in the community? And the other two big components are volunteerism and the grants we make. And so we're very fortunate in that every one of our teammates gets 8 hours paid time off a year to volunteer at the organization of their choice. Now, and that means...
I'm sorry, did everybody in this room hear that, right?
No.
That's a huge, congratulations, you deserve some applause for that. You're paying people to volunteer. That's amazing.
It is, and so, I know we're not going to get too far afield in terms of millennials and everything else, but it's increasingly important, and I say of their choice, and I get a chance to look at some of the organizations, and we got people volunteering at all sorts of really interesting things, is what I would say. And we do every walk, and probably like many of you, we do all those things. And increasingly, though, what we're trying to steer our teammates to, when it makes sense, is using their expertise to stand in front of a classroom and talk about how to budget. We've done work in 3rd and 5th grade classrooms, and people say, well, they're not going to bank with you. That's beside the point. The point, how many of you had kids? When they're in 3rd and 5th grade, they love you still, and you're smart,
It's not until 10th or 11th grade.
And then they come back. They do come back, and you're smart again. I love it when I was smart again. But 3rd and 5th grade kids take their homework home and show their parents around budgeting and those things. And so, we've done a lot of work with JA and a lot of really great organizations around helping people understand how to budget, how to create financial stability, because it's, the way I describe it is as close to we can get as preventive medicine in the financial world. And clearly the work in terms of folks who need help with their credit scores, with Operation Hope, and all of those things. And so I love it when we can partner a grant, and then there's an opportunity for our teammates to use their expertise with that organization. That's kind of a great opportunity for us.
And I'm seeing that very much as a trend.
Yeah.
So the businesses and philanthropists are looking for that opportunity, those of you searching for money. They're looking for the opportunity as an extension both of brand, but more importantly of passion, right? So it's not just a check anymore.
Yeah.
Although I know people probably hit you up all the time with, hey, I got this walk, can you send me some chicken?
Sure.
But really, right?
All the time.
All the time. I just did it on whatever day it was, right? I got some kids. Can you send some boxes over? But really, how does that extend beyond that whole notion of just we're going to give you, we're going to help you with the food side. Sure. David's is we're going to help you with some technology, but yours is really quite different because in your case, it's kind of a little more like SunTrust in this return on community, right?
It is. The notion of, we see this as leadership really is the notion that drives us, because we see what is the issue that we're trying to solve. I think oftentimes what I've seen, and I'm relatively new to this space as well, I'm a lawyer by training, but this is a space that, as I look at, oftentimes we give to organizations just because we give to organizations. We don't give to the need or to the problem that we're trying to solve. Yes. And yeah, we all have different levers. Employee engagement is one lever, and to allow your employees to have to go out and exercise their passion is one thing, but oftentimes, quite frankly, what we have found is we do that because it's good for morale, welfare, and recreation at Chick-fil-A. To allow our millennials, to allow our whomever to exercise their passions, and it's also good for the community. That's great, so we may not try and focus that, but our dollars are a different piece. Our dollars, we can focus on what is the actual problem we're trying to solve. If it's financial literacy, then we can focus it. Our chicken, sometimes we can focus our chicken on that issue as well. But sometimes our chicken is just, frankly, goodwill and being a good neighbor. Right. And so there are other opportunities for that, but really trying to find that specific issue.
Yeah, and I think when you add the return on investment paradigm, that has to be mutual between community player and provider of funds or technology or chicken or whatever it might be. We look at programs at Box.org through 3 primary lenses. Does whatever work we're pursuing support the community and the nonprofit that's involved? Is it enabling, empowering? Question number 1. Question number 2, is there a transformation or benefit to the Box employee that's involved in that work? Is he or she becoming more of a leader and being able to act on their fullest potential as number 2? And then number 3, is it good for the brand? Is it good for the business and our recruiting brand or our relationship building and so on? I mean, if you can only imagine and I worked at LinkedIn for 3 years, LinkedIn for Good, and I was at Salesforce.com for about 10 years, one of the first employees there. Salesforce has 5 days paid days off a year. LinkedIn has 12 days you can take off a year to volunteer. Silicon Valley.
Okay, SunTrust.
Wow.
Just saying.
He didn't say what Box said, though, but LinkedIn.
Yeah, and we're yet to establish that policy because at Box we don't even have PTO. We don't even have that, whatever that new policy is, where we don't even, anyway. So volunteering is definitely game on there. But I would say that when you approach, for those that are organizations seeking relationships with the corporate sector, look at, can the synergistic relationship and that chemistry that you build benefit, again, the community that together you're going to go address the needs with, but 2, is it good for their employees, and 3, is it good for their business? And I'm sometimes contrarian and a little, I don't know, I'm just bullish about that. I think that it needs to be mutually successful.
And actually agree with you. Now being on this side of the house, what I'm seeing more and more is that there truly is an expectation for all of you who raised your hand and said, I'm looking for money. The game has changed. Could we talk a little bit about impact, right? So what's important is this ability to measure what you deliver. So what are the impacts? How important is that to you? I'm listening to Rodney talk about, before we used to be able to do philanthropy because it felt good. And you kind of built it based upon that. But now, many things, including, I think, the Silicon Valley and technology, have changed that to the point where we have to identify a problem. We're no longer funding symptoms, but we're looking for root problems to cure, right? So your dollars are going toward root problems, not symptomatic conditions. And then on top of that, the expectation is that all of us on this side of the table can prove to you that we're solving that problem. So could you speak a bit to the shifting nature of impacts and measurements and how, we have to grow up a bit in that space?
So I'll start, and I'll just kind of let you in terms of the conversation we're having internally. It really is a really interesting conversation, I think, because as I'm having conversation with grantees, one of the things I say is, how do you define success? So we've identified you, and I think the way that Rodney described it in terms of the 3 C's is great. So we've gotten to that point, and so we start talking about measuring success. I'm reluctant to introduce new measurements into the process because that's just difficult. And the way that we're trying to figure this out would be lives impacted, is the way that we're saying it. Okay, how? And then the thing that you have to layer onto that is the depth of impact. In a perfect world for what we're doing around financial well-being, you would take a snapshot today and then say 10 years from now, what does it look like? Because you're trying to create sustainable changes, not just I went to a financial education class, I took the test, but I went back and did everything I was doing beforehand. How do you measure this sustainable, ongoing impact that you have to people? And so we've got a number of ways that we look at it, how many people attended sessions, what were the lives impacted, and then what I'm really trying to figure out would be, how do we measure the sustainability of that? And on a continuum would be, how do people then make changes in their own personal financial well-being that puts them on the first I'm in control, I feel like I'm in control of my finances, and I'm building confidence around that I'm going to have the life well spent that I wanted to have. And again, in my journey, in terms of talking to a number of other foundations and everybody else, I guess I found people are having the same kind of internal conversation around that.
So it's no longer good enough for any of us to simply say, I have conducted X number of training sessions. It's truly now this notion of longitudinal studies. It's this notion of deep dives into the impact of solving that social problem. So as our folks in the room think about it, it's important to think about your nonprofit in terms of solving that problem and diving deep into the impact and then the ongoing measurement of that. So,
and that's not for all of them, is what I would say.
Not for everybody, yeah.
I'm fortunate. The bank was founded by a gentleman named Linton Allen. He had a phrase, build your community and you build your bank. And I love that, and that is not build your bank and then your community. Build your community and you build your bank. And so there are things that we do that are for the common good. You know, that it doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to have this rigorous report card every quarter. There are things that we know, just because we know, that it is the right thing to do in the community, and there's going to always be those things.
And
that are the
that's
right
what we
thing
call
to
that
do.
return
Yeah.
on community measurement,
Exactly.
right? That's a little more qualitative than quantitative. And
Yeah.
back to your point about the local operator knowing his neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, I think that particularly when you try and solve a problem, a hard, knotty problem that's existed for eternity, it's hard to really measure quantitatively the impact. I mean, yeah, you can in smaller ways. I think sometimes it's as much anecdotal as it is anything else, and you have to be able to live with that. And it's tough for corporations in particular to do that. I mean, it's no different than in a corporation saying, hey, how does corporate social responsibility move our needle? I mean, to what was just said, as far as, you know, we're building our community, we're building our bank, we're building our brand. That's tough to quantify unto itself. But so sometimes I think there has to be an allowance, and we do offer an allowance of, you can't always measure this one-to-one, because what you plant today may come back tenfold in 10 years, and you just don't know that. And if you pull out, then you won't get that return on investment 10 years from now.
Yeah, and I think from the Silicon Valley, you know, go disrupt and break and innovate and redo and, you know, out with the old and in with the new, that whole philosophy of approaching things, like, it would be probably harder for me to walk into the 1,400 plus people who work for Box around the world and say, this is an issue and this is a training that I want you to go present related to tech. And we may get there, but for now it's been easier for me to say to 1,400 people, go innovate against a problem and determine what is going to really work for us and what's going to really stick. And then we can, instead of anchoring our mission as Box.org just to facilitating innovation and technology capability and technology inclusion for the nonprofit world, which again is some kind of big thing that we can affect and move, we're not as quick to say Box.org is affiliated with a greener environment and more kids in school and so on. It's easier for us to say we're going to foster innovation for the people who know about environments and know about school systems better than we do, but we'll be behind the scenes powering their innovation, a mindset of innovation, helping them get the right tools to do their work. And so for us so far, it's been less pertinent for me to say Box.org's programs have affected this many youth, but it is pertinent for me to say that we've affected the way of operating for 4,000 nonprofit organizations, and then infused a sense of innovation for them. Instead of telling them how to go apply the technology, let them know that the technology could help them solve the problems that they solve and see what happens, right, in a certain way. So allowing the crowd to really bubble up a lot of innovation and so on.
Yeah, yours is a little bit broader in terms of its application.
That's right.
But there are many foundations and many corporations who do say, I'm going to invest in environmental sustainability or financial literacy, or they're picking and choosing. So it's important to those of us who are looking for capital, looking for that support, to know that it's really not so much a shotgun approach anymore, right? It's important for us to do due diligence on the people that we're approaching and looking for money. So otherwise we're just spinning our wheels because you've already focused. SunTrust has already figured out that where they want to be in that space is around financial literacy, right?
And I'll say this, it's not also do your due diligence, but also there's a tendency once you do your due diligence to try and, I would say, paper mache what you do into
Right, exactly.
into that organization.
I do more than financial literacy.
Oh,
Now
yeah.
I'm building ships.
Yes. The way in which we build ships is educational. And so we're teaching folks math as they build ships. So there is a tendency to do that, and that's difficult.
Are you seeing that as well in SunTrust?
Yeah, that kind of goes back to my, if you're hungry or you don't have a home, to you that's financial well-being. That is. And so it is this definition thing, and I try to kind of talk about the things that we do without being too prescriptive around it. But it is, if you come to us and you're doing something clearly off the beaten path, I don't want people to try to make it within the beaten path.
Right.
Because I'm going to have looked at the website, I'm going to have done my research, I'm going to have looked at it as well. I'm going to say, I I don't see what you're describing anywhere on here, and it sounds great, you know, and it is. And so I think that is absolutely right.
And for the funders in the room, share of hands, because a lot of what I've said is kind of the organization seeking funding, but for funders, and grant makers, some of those in the room, like not that many. So I was just for a moment going to think about a perspective that may apply for y'all, but there's only 3 or 4 of you in the room, so we're going to pass it on down.
That's okay. They're signaling me that we're pretty close, but could you share your insight, just a best practice for those of us who are in search of funding, for those of us who want to change the world? Just give us a quick best practice if we're approaching a Chick-fil-A or approaching Box or approaching SunTrust. What's a best practice for us in terms of being successful in securing those grants or securing that money or securing those volunteers or just, tapping into your philanthropy?
I think you've hit on it. Do your homework is what I would say. In terms of understanding the purpose of the foundation or the charitable organization or who's doing it, and are you aligned with that? And then, we're pretty prescriptive in terms of, for our large grants, what we want to see. Give us the information we've asked for, I guess is for the best way to put it. We've talked about kind of what those impacts are. Help us help you. One of the things I do is when I get some of these that are larger and they're close, is I'll get on the phone and say, I didn't see this, I didn't see that, and it kind of goes back to this collaboration. I think it starts with the first request, and if it's close enough for us, then I get on the phone and kind of walk through, but I can tell who really has done their homework. And it doesn't mean we don't do it or not. I mean, there's nothing, we don't say, hey, you didn't do it, but it does make the conversation a better conversation relative to finding something that's within the sweet spot of what we're trying to solve and of the not-for-profit.
Yeah, and I would say briefly, when you approach an organization like Box, who is battling in the marketplace, and make no mistake, with much bigger competitors that do things similar, be they Microsoft or Google, that we compete with, we very much have to kind of mind the farm and make sure that our path to cash flow positive is a big priority. That said, balancing that then with doing right by the communities that we serve and doing right by our employees and doing right by that notion of impact says that to me, as the executive director of Box.org, if you are a local organization who does spoken word competitions, and Youth Speaks comes to mind for those that are aware of Youth Speaks. It's an amazing organization. But what I love about them is not only do they use Box, but when they came to me and we had a good lunch just 3 or 4 days ago, they didn't just say, we'd love for you to come sponsor, if you've got a couple $1,000s, the poetry jam that we're doing down at the City Hall. What they did is they said, we actually help foster the well-being of 90 other spoken word organizations that roll up to our national competition. And they're in our network. They're our sister organizations. We heard you donate Box to organizations. Well, we're videotaping our spoken word. We're videotaping our poetry. We've got a lot of art. We've got a lot of documents. Can you help us with that? So again, by approaching me and saying, we'd love for you to support the network of 90 organizations who are folding youth into their programs. And can you build some webinars because you're a tiny staff, Bryan? And can we do all this kind of, light lift but big impact, donating your technology? I said, absolutely. And that is going to be the type of thing that to me helps me build scale, build justification for a grant budget, build all the things that we need to build with the resources I have today. So again, it's not necessarily seeing the little bitty picture when you approach an organization, especially if they're still trying to get their bearings philanthropically, but come in with bigger ideas or something that can scale faster to address a problem. It's like if Rodney came to me and he said, hey, we convened 100 community leaders in West Atlanta this morning at 7 a.m., that's interesting to me, right? Because there's 100 people at the table that I can help at one time. And if I can support the conveners as much as I support the constituents within that convening, I'm even more interested in building something strategic together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm definitely going to talk to you about that. But I just wrote that down before you said it.
And all of those who want to convene, I would have that conversation.
I think, and I'll focus back on the relationship piece. I think it's so important for you to have relationships, and sometimes it's tough to have relationships with organizations. And I'll say this, be gently persistent. Understand that if you're trying to have a relationship, it's 150 to 200 to 500. And if it's a national organization, it's you in every city and every hamlet in this country trying to also have a relationship. So understand that. But be gently persistent. So if you don't get a call, if you don't get this, I would say be careful about, because oftentimes you'll see people try and go different levels and here and there. Sometimes that can be against you. If you try and go a level above that you think, because you don't know the politics within. And sometimes you can disturb the apple cart and you can upset people. So be very careful about that, and I see that often. And in the end, really try and articulate, what you can do for that organization. Because oftentimes I see those who are seeking feel like there is an entitlement. Well, you're supposed to give me this because we're doing good work. Well, you are, but you're not the only one, and everybody's well-intentioned. And so how can you help the organization that you are seeking money from? And it may not be in a fiscal sense. It may not be in a Machiavellian sense. It may be you're really trying to solve this issue. This is how we help you solve this issue. We're Box.org, and this is how we help you solve this issue because we have this technology. Well, we have this competency, this relationship, this ability, this geography, these whatever. This is how we help you solve this issue. I think that's always helpful in any networking situation. Whenever you're meeting somebody, how do I benefit you? Because now the conversation is so much more interesting and so much richer. So that's my 2 cents.
I couldn't agree more with that. Like if those early calls that come into my office were, we went out and did some research on Box, or we went and got the donated access, and we thought about how we could actually use it to manage our fundraising, and I'd love to talk to you about that. I'll take that call quickly, because that again is my core competency, which is this cloud-based solution applied to social impact. And you've done some of that thinking for me. So that's just a very concrete example of, I think, what Rodney was saying. Like, think about how his talents, treasure, and time could be applied to an issue. Do some of that thinking for him and for us. That comes to mind for me.
Back to your point about the homework piece, right?
That's right.
So first of all, I want to thank all of you, not just as panelists, but as philanthropists.
Oh,
and so for us, right? For us, it's all about changing the world, and what you're doing is doing good, right? So I think we've learned our lessons. We have to think as business people. We have to think about returns on investment. We have to think about focus. We must do our homework. And importantly, it's an evolution. Build the relationships, build the direction, be gently persistent. And then together, I would talk about collaborating amongst each other as well. So if these guys are looking for broader-based impact, there may be other nonprofits with whom you can team to bring that mass back to them together to solve a social issue. So be responsible. Thank you for joining us. And if we can answer questions, if you look at the app that Operation Hope has for the Hope Global Forum and download it, there's contact information in there. I encourage you to continue the dialogue. Reach out to me at any time. All of us would be happy to work with you. So thank you for joining us. Go out and change the world.
I appreciate it.